I mean, so when I talk to people about skunkworks now, probably one of the first things I talk about is the fact that it was a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
It was the most intense 3 years that I've had in my entire life.
You're listening to Mind is Your Own Business. My name is Salla Ibrahim and I'm your host. In this podcast, we share stories that are usually left untold. We shed light to the struggles and learnings of successful people who have used Laavu's psychological coaching. We hope that by this we could validate the fact that each and every one of us have our own struggles and maybe also give you some insights how to cope with your own mind. Today, as a guest, I have the amazing James Cramer, an ambitious entrepreneur who has built a gaming company from scratch. He's a guy who has definitely experienced the highs and lows of being a founder and CEO. So he's the perfect guy to talk about our today's topic, which is emotional rollercoaster. Happy to have you here, James.
Thanks. Really nice to be here.
So my first question is, how would you introduce yourself to the listeners?
So, as you know, my name is James. I'm a father. That's the main priority in my life.
Happy
so
Father's Day now, one day after.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, that's my main vocation in life. As Salla said, I'm an entrepreneur, so I've been working for startups actually for around 10 years actually now. And then in 2018, I decided to build my own. It took a while to get that off the ground, but then eventually we did, and we grew a company called Skunkworks. That sadly didn't make it through the startup test. It lasted a couple of years, and now I'm working on a new thing, which might take some time, but it will get done eventually.
With Skunkworks, you did quite amazing things, though. So you described it quite like, we did this thing and it didn't go through, but you did quite amazing things with Skunkworks.
Yeah, thanks.
We're talking about emotional roller coaster today. What has lately made you super happy and what has put you down?
Well, let's start with what's put me down. I think, as we were just discussing before this, the weather. This is November in Finland, and after 10 years in Helsinki, it does not get any easier. It's very, very difficult to deal with, but I still somehow enjoy it because we get a lot of work done, I think, at this time of year.
Mm-hmm.
What's made me very happy, my phone rang the other day, and I can't really talk about it, but it was a cold call, and it ended up being a 2-hour cold call, and that went very, very well. So, yeah, it's a bit vague. I'm sorry, but but my phone ringing is the thing that made me happy.
Cool. So. Is it something to do with your new business?
Yes.
Okay. Exciting. No more reveals about that. We have feelings. Like they vary from negative to positive. But what I have noticed is that many founders and entrepreneurs, they are riding this emotional roller coaster where the highs are super high and then the lows can be extremely low.
Yes.
Have you recognized this in your own life or seeing from other?
I mean, so when I talk to people about skunkworks now, probably one of the first things I talk about is the fact that it was a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
It was the most intense 3 years that I've had in my entire life. I mean, we went from not low, but like intense. We had a lot of intensity at the beginning because we had a small team, very young and inexperienced. We had what we called the week of death, where we incorporated the company, and there was like this week where we weren't sure we were going to actually be able to get funding or not. And so that we had that, and then we went through several rounds of fundraising. We raised 5.8 million, over 5 rounds actually. And we had our game, Merge Friends, which generated millions of downloads and millions of euros of revenue. Then we had on the other side of that, like the crash of that game and the company and all the stuff. So yeah, we've really seen it all. So.
What was the highest high that you recall?
Well, there's many. Probably the first 6 weeks of the global launch of Merge Friends. It's quite an incredible feeling when you're not really sure. Like you have a suspicion that things are going to go well, because when you launch a mobile game, you launch it in like small markets. Okay, so like you might launch it in 6 to 12 markets at like the very end of the soft launch. And then when you go to the big markets like the US and the UK, Germany, and so on, you don't really know what's going to happen. And in our case, like we had this graph, which was a red line versus a green line, so spend versus revenue. And every time we increased our spend, like there would be a lag of maybe 1 to 2 days, and then the green line would go up. You know, and it was like no matter how much we turned the tap, like put more and more money, more and more fuel on the fire, it just kept on going up and up and up, and that was that's an incredible feeling. Like I don't know how to describe that. That makes you feel like Superman times 10.
And how was the team? What size of a team did you have at that time?
At that time, probably 10 or 11.
Yeah.
I think. So we had the 4 founders and then a couple of new employees. So actually some of the new employees had only been working for the company for a month or 2 at that point. There was a few who had been around since like maybe October of the previous year, but then the core founding team had been since the very beginning of the product. So.
Cool. Yeah. So maybe like being proud might have been the core feeling there. How did you, what was the kind of the core feeling that you had as a founder and CEO of that company? Joy.
Like, it felt like winning the Champions League and the World Cup all at the same time. Do you know what I mean? It's because, especially from my point of view, I'd worked on many games. I'd worked for a few different startups and a few different companies, and some of the games that I'd really believed in didn't do anything, you know, and that breaks your heart. Like when you put a lot of time in your career into a new game and you really, really believe in it and you think like the players should love this, but you put it out there and it just doesn't succeed, that's heartbreaking. And so when it finally works, and additionally, like the metrics we had for this game were industry leading. I mean, they were really like Supercell level of success. We thought at the time, naively, I suppose. But what you feel is joy. It's pure joy. I mean, sure, you can feel proud, and especially when you talk to your industry peers. But I don't know, my feeling was that it wasn't that I was ashamed, or I was trying to be humble. You know what I mean? I was trying to remain humble and trying to keep the feet on the ground, and just people would congratulate you all the time, but I didn't pay too much attention to that. I just felt super happy that we were having this, you know, because you put so much time into building a company as well, and then suddenly it pays off. So
then you're just trying to keep your feet on the ground.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. Like I was trying to be humble. I was trying to respect everybody around us, everybody that had supported us. I was trying to even downplay some of the stuff at the time. So, yeah.
So what about the other side of the coin? What has been the lowest low during Skunkworks?
Well, I mean, the end of the company. It was really like, that was heartbreaking, like really, really heartbreaking. We were flying pretty high, you know, and then suddenly it's like, oh, we're not.
So it was quite sudden, like you were.
It was very
high
sudden.
and then.
Yeah, and even like we had 32 employees, I think, at the time, or 34. And even having to try to explain to those guys, like, look, guys, this is really the end. It was like, my heart was broken, and I'm trying to break other people's hearts by breaking the news to them. That was the worst. That's by far, because you put your heart and soul into a company.
It's like your baby.
It is. I mean, especially as my first one, you know, like, it's not my last, right? And I always knew that, but it was my first company, and I was always thinking, you know, I was really in love with this thing. But yeah, it was heartbreaking.
So what happened there? Why was it so sudden?
Well, that's a long story. That's a podcast by itself. So basically, we miscalculated quite a lot on the financial side. So we spent quite a lot of money in Q1 of this year that we shouldn't have spent. We invested in UA that we shouldn't have invested in. UA being user acquisition, for your listeners that don't know. And we got to a point where we're like, okay, we've only got a few months of runway left. This thing is too bloated. We're not making enough money from the game to support this huge team that we've built. And then ultimately, out of our control, completely separately from our control. The capital markets just dried up. So they just completely, like, all the investment potential evaporated.
That happened suddenly. It was like
Very
the money
suddenly.
was floating in the beginning of the year, and then
Imagine I was at so I was at GDC in San Francisco in March, and I was there kind of like yeah, we're fine, like, with a drink at a cocktail party, like, yeah, we're fine, how are you doing, and like thinking that we've got all the time in the world. And then I came back, and the CFO told me, like, hey, there's not enough money to last past the summer, so we need to go and fundraise. And then going to the investors and being told, like, no, it's over, like it's dead, like the investment markets are now dead. And the main problem for us was that our valuation had gone too high. So because of the joy of the success the previous year, we had raised at a certain valuation, and then suddenly the markets were saying, well, we don't invest at those valuations anymore. So unless you're willing to come down significantly and do a down round, which is also very difficult, then it was almost impossible to raise money at that stage. So yeah, we didn't have any money in the bank. We didn't have enough revenue. We had too big a team, and we couldn't raise anymore. And that's it. And then it was just like, okay, that's the end.
If you recall back to that moment, how did you feel personally?
Well, it wasn't really a moment. I mean, it was several months. Like, it was. It took me, I would say, weeks for what I was being told by investors to really sink in. Like, I didn't believe it, because we'd been doing so well, especially on fundraising, and we'd been the darlings of like one of our portfolio companies, and like, we were doing super well. And when they just tell you, no, you've got to reduce your headcount significantly, like immediately, like yesterday, if you want this company to survive, it didn't sink in. It just, like, no, I can't be serious. They don't know the whole story, But I mean, they did. They knew the whole story, and we didn't. So it just took a while for the whole thing to sink in. And then when it did, I think I went through, the 5 stages of grief. You know what I mean? But kind of sadly for me, I went through that before everybody else at the company. So I was way ahead of everybody. So by the time they were realizing what was going on, I was already in this acceptance phase and kind of just being like able to deal with it emotionally for a while. So
it can be also quite a lonely place for the leader, because you need to go through it all before the team goes through it. So the team has each other, but then as a leader you need to kind of face it all alone, and then think about how do you communicate this, and how do you support the others at the same time you are doing the grief work yourself.
Yeah, it's extremely lonely, I would say. And afterwards, one of our artists, so one of the first employees at the company, Yoka, made this comment, which was like, I knew it. As soon as James started to be away from the team, he knew what was going on because he'd seen it before. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I was like isolating myself. I was away from everybody for a long time. And so most working days I would be sitting alone, like hammering out emails by myself, and everybody else is in the kitchen, and I can hear like people laughing and joking and stuff, and I'm thinking, like, they have no idea. They have no idea. And you try to maintain a level of like a wall, because you can't tell them. You can't just like burst their bubble like that. And so yeah, it was a really lonely time, I would say, towards the end.
So where did you get support on those times? How did you handle the feelings?
Good question. I spent a lot of time in the gym. I've always been quite well equipped personally to deal with those things, to process. I'm very good at sort of spending time by myself and letting the thoughts play out in my mind, and just getting things sort of, my ducks in a row mentally. And then of course my family, talk to my mum a little bit. I did also keep her in the dark a little bit as well, I've got to admit. But then mostly just hitting the gym, exercise outside, girlfriends, that kind of stuff. So yeah.
So if you're thinking about the stages of grief, where are you now?
What's the final one? Acceptance.
You're over it.
I'm over it. Yeah. It's I mean, you can't dwell. Of course I'm sad. I'm still really, really sad, and sometimes I still like I'll like go into a period where I still think about it, and it might last a few hours. It's like my thoughts are like swirling. But I'm ready to sort of accept, okay, that was what it was, and that was just the first company, and let's move on and do another one. Let's learn what we learn and move on and do something else. So.
In generally, I think that the founders, entrepreneurs, business leaders are like, they are more commonly riding this emotional roller coaster. Like your story is quite like dramatic, and it's kind of course he's riding this emotional roller coaster because of the context and everything that happened with Skunksworks. But what do you think that is the reason behind leaders having such a strong emotion? Like in generally, like it's very common that during, for example, a week or 2 weeks time, you have like the perfect self-confidence, and then the next day you're like, oh shit, this is never gonna happen, and what are we gonna do? This is what
existential crisis.
It's what I've witnessed from my own experience, but also talking with our clients. What do you think that is? Why is it so common among the leaders?
I mean, it's just the nature. I can't speak for corporate leaders. I don't really know much about corporate leadership. But for startup leaders, it's just an inherent thing. You start a company with almost no resources, unless you're really lucky and you end up like with millions and millions and millions in the bank from the very beginning, which is very rare. But you have a goal in mind, and you have very little resources to get it done, and then plus you have to spread your wings so wide across the business. You have to do everything. And so the model itself is inherently roller coaster like, in the sense that, not everything is going to be working correctly all the time, but you are the one that has to deal with it all the time.
And you have to have the belief, like you need to believe in the vision, even though you're like bootstrapping and you have
and even if your self-belief takes a bit of a knock, like your belief in what you're doing has to be unshakable. And the moment that you start to get some doubt, then take a break, really step away, let somebody else take over for a minute. But I don't know, I was thinking about this. You sent me your questions like last week, and I was thinking about it quite a bit, and I was thinking about it from this angle of like, why do we leaders just do this to ourselves? Like, why do we persist with this? And I think the answer I kind of came up with was that it's actually kind of an addiction in the end. You're addicted to that roller coaster of emotions. And like with all addictions, the more you do it, the less you feel. And so people interpret that as being some kind of resilience. But actually it's an addiction.
It's addiction.
It's like purely, you've built up, what's the word I'm looking for, when you don't feel, like if you smoke, you don't get the rush of
the tolerance.
Yeah, you build up a tolerance to the stress, and it just becomes normal to you. And you're really, really addicted to it. And I don't know if I ever kind of craved the drama or the joy or any of those things. I'm not sure. But I do know that like at all times I had the goal in mind. And that was what kept me just going for the risky choices and the things that cause the drama.
And now you're building a new company because of the addiction.
I don't know if there's rehab for this, but I mean, the goal hasn't changed. Ultimately, it's kind of funny because it'll be a different company and it'll be trying to fulfill a different purpose, but the goal has not changed. So,
and what's the goal?
Well, there's two. Like from a selfish point of view, I'd like to have some financial independence. I'd like, by the time I hit my 50s, which is shockingly not that far away, to have a lot more say over what I do with my days. So I'd like to work on projects that I enjoy in the future. But then also this kind of more vague, sort of big overarching goal, which is like wanting to make an impact, wanting to build something big. I remember when I was working for Supercell like years ago, and we were in Barcelona airport, and there was a couple of us wearing Supercell shirts, and some guy was literally playing Clash of Clans on his phone, and he looked up and we all walked past and he went, like, this kind of shocked look on his face, and it's like, oh, it's you guys. And I kind of I like that, the idea of that impact, that you build something that affects people's lives, and that they, that they will interact with and touch. And you're just a bunch of people in an office in Helsinki that made that, and you touch the lives of people across the world. That's, just making something impactful that people remember and recognize. So.
Makes sense. And I think many other entrepreneurs can relate to that.
I hope
as
so.
well.
Yeah, I hope so.
So what I've been thinking is the startup scene is known for its hype and positive energy, and like I said, you need to believe in the vision and be optimistic. But there are also the lows, pretty strong. Do you think that lows are as much socially accepted as the highs? And if not, why is that?
I have a controversial hot take on this. I think social media, in particular LinkedIn, is quite shallow. And people do the high-fiving and great job, you guys were amazing, and all the support and stuff, and the comments. And there might be, within, all that support, there will be a couple of people that will reach out to you privately. I've had a couple of people reach out to me privately and stuff. But for the most part, it's for their own optics, I think. That's a bit of a controversial take, maybe, because everyone wants to be seen as being positive. But the reality is that once that sort of, the post has sort of gone off people's news feeds, they forget about it, and they're not there to help you pick up the pieces, I think. And you do actually need like a great deal of mental strength. I found through making skunkworks, I found that I'm actually quite mentally strong. That was one of the biggest discoveries I made about myself. And you need it. You need to have a lot of depth and be able to sort of dig deep and get your way through those problems, because they won't stop. They come thick and fast, and you can't control like when they come and what happens. So I don't know. I guess to summarize, my answer is that I feel like people try to be supportive on the surface level, but ultimately that deeper support, it's like, that's why we liked Laavu and Skunkworks, because we're not talking about an entrepreneurial journey, but everybody has a journey. Whether you're a staff artist or janitor or whatever, you have your own personal journey, and services like this, like for me, just super invaluable, because not everybody has the tools or the means mentally to dig that deep. So,
but do you think we should be in general more open about the like mistakes we make and our vulnerabilities? Like you have been very open about Skunkworks' story. How do you feel about that? And like, should we do that more?
I have like no shame. That's my problem. I mean, yes, I think so. But I don't know whether it's as much we should just be more open about these things, or people should just be less judgmental. Because there is judgmental. For all the support, there is a lot of people that don't say anything, and they're the ones sort of like kicking you while you're down.
Have you encountered that people are kicking you when you're already on the ground?
No comment, but yes.
Okay. Well, that's a shame.
But I think like in general, it's just nice to be able to talk about this stuff, to be honest. It's nice to hear something from the horse's mouth also. And I think a lot of people, they just feel quite defensive and like they don't want to be honest about their own failures, maybe because they haven't really admitted them to themselves or something, but I'm fully okay with it. Like I said, I have no shame.
That's good. And I think the paradox is also, if we don't share the mistakes, if we don't share the downs, then we're never going to get the support. If we only share the highs and the like success stories, then we're only going to get praise for that. If we keep quiet about the other side, then we're not going to get the support that we might need.
Yeah, and that's very hollow, isn't it?
Yeah,
what is it really worth then in the end?
Exactly.
So
you already mentioned the going to the gym and getting support from your mom, for example, when the lows were lowest. But what other kind of tools have you learn to use to smooth the ride, kind of?
Oh, yeah, good question.
Or do you even want to smooth the ride now that you mentioned that it's an addiction?
No, I just want more. So I spend quite a lot of time processing and thinking, which I feel is not something everybody can do. I've noticed that there's quite a lot of people who they can't not be reading a book or can't not be organizing the fridge or cleaning the apartment or going for a walk or being active. Like I'm very, very good at like just switching my brain into this mode of processing.
Is it self-reflection also?
Oh yeah, everything really. Like I will, if I have a problem, let's say we're in the middle of skunk works right now and I have a problem to solve. I might think of 12 ways to solve that problem, you know. But then on the other side of that, if something went wrong, I might then do a lot of self-reflection, like a huge amount of self-reflection, and figure out what was my part in that. What did I say? What did I do? How did I react? Was this wrong? What would I do in the future, most importantly? And so I'm just able somehow to, like, that's my tool, I think. That's my superpower. I don't listen to many podcasts. I just go on them. And I would prefer to listen to music quite often with no lyrics because it allows me to think on a different level. So that I think that's my main tool is just a lot of thinking, processing, self-reflection. I go for walks. I live on Laavu Performance, so I walk around Laavu Performance, for example. I don't know if that means anything to any foreign viewers, but it's an island.
The happy island.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think my main tool is just the ability to process, to be honest. Yeah.
So talking about processing and learning, what have been the biggest learnings from the journey so far?
Well, like I already said, I learned that I'm a lot more mentally strong than I thought I was. Especially when I was younger, I think I had a lot of doubts and I've been quite shy in the past. Now I've just overcome all of those things, like completely. That's one of the big learnings. I think another big learning is, you know, it's quite easy to get people to jump on board with a good idea, but it's a lot different to like, you know, the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So it's like, that's also another major learning is like, just because the idea is good and the concept is good and the execution looks good from the outside and stuff, getting that whole system to perform in the correct way is, that's my next big challenge, I would say.
It's like how to motivate people to work towards the vision. You can show the vision, but how do you?
Yeah, I suppose motivation plays a big part in it, but it's also ways of working and building systems for performance. So, like, sadly, that's something we didn't pay enough attention to, I think, at Skunk Works, was we didn't have a performance-driven culture. We had a very friendly culture, and we had it was a really nice place to work. You know, it was really nice people. Everyone got along very, very well. But we just didn't have that sort of performance aspect to it. So people weren't sort of egging each other on to do better. And in fact, it was quite different, that people were just telling each other they were already doing a great job. But when you're looking from the financial point of view, from the top level, it's like, this might not be as good as you think it is. You know, so building in that more high performance culture, I think, is the next big challenge. That's the major learning for me is like, when we started the company, one of the things I said was I wanted to build a team of people who would run through walls for one another, no matter what, that they would always be there to pick each other up and support each other, and there was a very altruistic culture. And we did that. We succeeded with that very, very well. But it wasn't the type of altruistic culture where people would say, it doesn't matter that you failed, but you can do better. You know, like it's like, let's get better, let's win. You know, and so I'm a sports fan, so winning things is should be second nature, really. But yeah, I think that's one of the big learnings as well for me. Like, building a great culture is not as difficult as I thought it would be. And it's almost certainly a reflection of the founding team of the company and our personalities, I would say. But how to get from that altruistic, cultural sort of group to a high performance group, one that wants to win.
Yeah, I think it requires a lot of courage from the team to kind of be able to say that, hey, you did good, but you could do better in this.
Yeah.
Like, it's much easier to be friendly and happy and we are the best team and family than bring out the tough things. And
Yeah, I think one of the things that's quite difficult, especially in a group like that, is nobody then, when it's so altruistic and friendly, nobody wants to be the outlier. And so from the very beginning, I think trying to understand how it should be okay to be the outlier. It should be okay to sometimes say, like, look, I know everyone is in love with this thing, but hold up. You need to just take a pause a minute, guys. Like, this could be better. You know, and how to get to that is the next big challenge.
Do you have any answers yet? What will you do differently in your new company?
No, I don't. Yeah, I suppose I could. So I have a co-founder now with this next thing who's very, very big on this. And he would be a really good guest actually for you. So
okay, so the next episode will be with him.
The next episode with that guy, yeah. No, not yet. Nothing that I could sort of articulate. It's more about, like, I've got a lot of work to do, I would say. A lot of thinking and
more self-reflection and processing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's never ending
journey
for anyone.
Yeah, you shouldn't stop doing that, I think. And the moment you think you know everything, you're dead. Yeah. Like, you shouldn't ever reach that point where you think that, oh, I'm the best because of X, Y, Z. It's like, well, stay humble. You know, exactly. There's always more to learn. There is always more combinations of failure that you could face. So, yeah.
Well said. So, anything you'd like to share to fellow entrepreneurs struggling with difficult emotions, maybe right now?
Yeah, I guess, you know, you're not alone. It might feel very lonely, but you're not alone. And there is a lot of other people out there who are feeling very, very similar to you. Inside and outside of startups as well. I think leadership in general is quite a lonely place. I mean, it's lonely at the top, right? That's a saying. And so don't feel like you are by yourself. But also, I would say just learn to dig deep. Like, learn to find the tools and within yourself to sort of bring yourself through those moments. Maybe even in a way think of it like an addiction, that, you know, you can sort of power through these moments because you have a goal. You have a thing that you want to achieve. And I know that probably doesn't fit with the ethos of psychologists who think we should, who say we should talk everything through.
That can be like kind of accepting that it's part of the ride, and I think that's a good tip for anyone who is struggling with strong emotion, because I think the biggest problem is that we try to avoid the downs, and that's where you go wrong, because you should kind of enjoy it and accept that this is part of the thing, and it's okay to feel down at times, and then it will be usually a smoother ride in the end.
Yeah, and you know, one thing that I was told at multiple points along the ride that I was emotional. So I was told that like 3 times, and I've never heard that before in my entire life. And but I obviously done a lot of reflection on that. Like, am I really emotional? Like, I used to get angry when things didn't go my way when I was a bit younger, you know, when I was in my 30s. But I think now, like, it's okay to play out anger. It's okay to play it out. Like, I think that's why I like to go to the gym, you know, because I can play it out physically as well as mentally at the time. Like, I can get it all out of my system in one go. But I don't know if it's specific maybe to this part of the world where, like, turning off your emotions or being emotional is kind of frowned upon socially. Because I couldn't imagine a Latin American saying, like, don't be emotional. You know,
it's part of the culture and
exactly.
Being a human there.
Exactly. And, you know, I would just say, just don't be afraid to play it out. Like, don't be afraid to let your emotions, like, go through what they need to go through. in whatever period of time.
Yeah.
Just don't do it publicly. Don't put a traffic cone on your head and
Why
go
not?
dancing on cars down the street. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
just allow it to you know, let it flow through you.
Mm.
In the immortal words of Emperor, whatever his name is from Star Wars. But yeah, you just gotta let it play through. Don't be afraid.
Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to share? Something that was left unmentioned?
If you want a nice life, just don't start a company.
A nice life, yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
I mean, you can just save over 20 years to buy a house and a car.
Yeah.
Don't try to get rich quick.
It's not the easiest way, but it's for sure
It's
fun.
a way for sure.
It's a way.
Yeah. On a more serious note, I don't know, not really. I don't know if I have anything serious to say.
No worries. I enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much, James, for coming as a guest to our podcast.
Thanks for inviting me.